Hey, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. Wonderful.
Perfect.
Okay,
Perfect.
so please introduce us to yourself.
So my name is Kate. Do you want first and last name or does it matter? I don't
Oh,
really care. My name is
so,
Kate.
so, so, so you're cutting up a little bit. Are you connected to the Wi-Fi?
I am. Am I jumpy?
You were jumping, but you're good now. But you don't have to say your
Okay.
last name if you're not comfortable with
Okay. That's fine. So I live in the Pacific Northwest. I live in the Portland metro area. So looking outside, we got the rain coming down. I'm trying to get some good lighting in here with the other lights because this is my seasonal depression time of year.
it. So it's not snowing over there right now.
Nope, nope.
Oh, nice. Or is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like rain or snow?
Uh, Rain, we're used to the rain. We love the snow when it comes, but it's funnily, we're not prepared for it when it gets here. So, like, the entire area just shuts down if there's like 3 inches of snow on the ground. It's hilarious.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So we need to talk about your handles. So you have two separate handles. One of them is little K bomb.
Yep, little Kate
Yes.
Bomb.
Okay. So what do your handles mean?
Little Kate Bomb is just, I think my husband helped me come up with it. My maiden name changed obviously when I got married. I took his name. My maiden name was way cooler than my married name, but for some reason I let it go. So we tried to spice up his last name and gave me the Bomb, Bomb.
Oh, I like that. And then your other handle, Keitosan. Did I say that right?
Keitosan. Yes, it's
Keitosan.
Japanese. Yeah. So I lived in Japan for a little while, about a million years ago. And that's what my students, I taught English over there. And so my students called me Keito-san. So that's a name that I often use when I need a nickname for something. It's like taken a lot of the time though, because it's common.
How cool. Okay. So you were diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
True.
How old were you when you were diagnosed?
45.
And what were some of your symptoms?
So I love to talk about this because I started having symptoms in the summer of 2019, and they're very vague, especially for women my age that might be going toward menopause, but not there yet. So I was still having my regular periods and all of that, but some maybe additional cramping, some abdominal discomfort. And urinary frequency was like the big one for me. Just felt like I had a UTI, but I never did. So finally, my doc said, you should go see your OBGYN and get this looked at just to make sure there's not anything else going on. Um, so, yeah, I don't have any of the risk factors, no family history. Kind of pride myself on being a healthy lady. Don't drink, don't smoke, veggie based diet. Um, I had 2 kids. I breastfed them both for many, many years. So all of the things that put me on the side of not having cancer, which led to the diagnosis taking a little bit of time, just because no one was looking for that, right? They say don't look for a zebra, you look for a horse, right? But I'm the zebra. So yeah, so that was when my journey began about a year ago right now, actually, was when I kind of realized that there was something more serious going on.
Where is the first place that ovarian cancer starts to hit? If that sentence makes sense.
It does. So oftentimes it originates like in the fallopian tubes, and it'll move out to the ovaries. It can be masked a lot of times to look like just polycystic ovaries, or
Mhm.
super common for women to have cysts to come and go, especially when you're ovulating and menstruating, which I still was. So yes, you start to notice the symptoms of a cyst, and then they usually do an ultrasound and say, yeah, you have a cyst. We'll follow it and look at it again in a few months and see if it's changed. So that's kind of the protocol for it.
Um, and now you're still going through. So you're still going through chemo right now currently?
So I finished my chemotherapy, they call it frontline treatment. It's your first introduction to chemo. I did 6 rounds of that. It took about 5 months. And that ended on July 1st. And then I started an oral medication, a pill that I take every day. It's not quite a chemo, but it's easier for people to understand that it's doing roughly this. I mean, it's a maintenance medication. Um, Ovarian cancer recurs quite frequently. Like everyone wants to know, like, are you in remission? Are you in remission? And
Hmm.
they don't say remission with it. So you sort of want to reach certain milestones for how long you go without having a recurrence. And that's the way we gauge it with ovarian cancer. So anything that you can do to prolong that time makes for a better outcome down the line, and obviously gives you time for them to develop new treatments, which they're always doing. Um, Never fast enough, it seems. I think the treatment for ovarian cancer was the same for like 30 years. It was just like, throw this at it. If it works, it works. If not, there wasn't much else they could do. But they're developing a lot of, with all cancer though, right? Like targeted therapies, immune therapies. I'm in a clinical trial as a part of my treatment. I just decided to sign up for everything. Kind of an overachiever. So I'm followed very closely, which is nice. I get a lot more blood work taken, and nice and not nice. There are times I definitely just want it to be like out of sight, out of mind. I don't want to be a patient, but I have young kids. I really want to prolong, the amount of time that I get to spend with them.
So throughout throughout the process, how did it make you feel physically?
Chemotherapy,
Yes.
um, it's a strange thing because it's very individualized. What I've realized is that certain telltale things happen, right? You go bald. Like that was like a big thing, right? As women, I think so much of our identity is in how we look, and my hair was kind of one of my things. So anyway, so those sort of side effects, just the physical, eyebrows and eyelashes were the hardest for me because it's when I think I looked the sickest. Um, Physically, it's a full body thing, and I often told my husband that I felt like I would go into like a little cave for a few days while I could kind of feel it going through my system. I went every 3 weeks to get an infusion. And you kind of lose track of time a little bit because your body kind of aches. Your sleep is interrupted because of that. I didn't have too much. Starts leaving your body and you start to kind of come back to the planet. And I remember a day that my husband in August came into the kitchen and was like, "Hey, good to see you," because I think probably a light or something came back on. Yeah. So does that answer your question or?
Yes, it 1,000% does answer my question, and I
Okay. Yeah,
okay, sorry. We froze there
that's
for a
okay.
second. I apologize. Instagram just
That's
recently did
okay.
an update, so I don't know
Yeah.
what they're doing. But I also want to say thank you for your service because you are a nurse, correct?
I am a registered nurse. I
Yes.
am. I'm sidelined at the moment, but definitely shout out to all my frontline healthcare workers that are out there doing their thing. It's definitely been hard to watch from the sidelines this time, but they're in my like thoughts and prayers every single day.
Is that what you always want to be since a child, or is that something you just decided roll the dice? I'll try and be a nurse.
I came to it in a very roundabout way. I had, breaking down and building myself back up in a new way is not new to me. About 15 years ago, I went through a big life change. I quit drinking and wanted to start my whole life over. Um, and I did a lot of, like mindfulness and all that weird stuff that, to try to find what I was supposed to do. And it was like nursing sort of came to me at that time. And so I went back to college and got a degree, got another degree, and I started nursing at that time. So I guess it kind of was. I mean, it felt like a calling once I got there. It was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. I love the patients. I love um, the variety. I've done a lot of different types of nursing in just a short time. And so I've really gotten to, I miss it a lot. It becomes an identity once you start doing it. It becomes a lot of like who you are and how you like define yourself in the world. So it's definitely been an interesting thing to like have that sort of taken away along with the hair and everything. It's like, whoa, what is the world trying to, I'm listening, what's the world trying to get me to slow down and do? So I'm really aware of that right now of like, okay, maybe there's something else that's calling me at this point. So,
Mm, mm. So something you just said, you said you went back to get a second degree. What was your first degree in?
I'm an anthropologist. And it's funny because I was just listening to this lady talk about the vaccine rollout for COVID, and she's an anthropologist and she goes around the world and studies what people think about vaccines. And I was like, oh, cool, like that's kind of my kind of lady, um, yeah. So I've had an interesting life. I studied anthropology. I went to the University of Kansas, got a degree there way back in the 90s, end of the 90s. And I was in archaeology, kind of that was my focus. So I've gone and dug up bones and arrowheads and things like all over the
No.
I have.
Really? Like
Yeah, I
that's
got
like
a
Jurassic Park.
yeah, kind of. Although I did early human like nomadic people. So we looked mainly for like weapons, like hunting tools, butchering tools, and animal bones. So like not tombs and things like that. My husband's always like, "What do you think about the pyramids?" I'm like, "That wasn't my thing. I did bones and arrowheads and stuff." But yeah, so I had my 20s. I often joke that I had my retirement in my 20s. I did like everything I ever wanted to do in my 20s, and then got to 30 and decided that was when I wanted to kind of focus my life and settle down a little bit. And that's when I started my family, got my nursing degree, married my husband. And
I love
yeah.
that. So as an anthropologist and as an RN, what are your
Hmm.
thoughts on the COVID vaccine?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think it's interesting. Uh, because my first one of my nursing jobs was in pediatrics, and so a large focus of my life at that time was vaccinations. And I was living in an area of Oregon that doesn't necessarily vibe with that. There's like a big anti-vax movement there, and so that was a really interesting time to be a pediatric nurse and to try to go to moms groups. And I was like the felt like I was the bad guy. I was the needle jabber. But I'm interested in vaccines in that regard, right? Like I'm interested in the historical idea that I feel like we've come a long way since infectious disease affected our lives. And so people don't really know on a daily basis how much different our lives are because of vaccines, right? Like I'm very pro um, eradication of infectious diseases. And what's interesting though, at this point, is I would have thought after COVID that it would sort of turn people to like know the importance and recognize it as a part of like a functioning society. So it's interesting to me that there's still those splinters. I feel like that's going to be the next thing that we're sort of battling as a society, are those two factions of vaccination versus not vaccination. I'm all for it. If it's safe for me, I'll get it. My brother is a physician. He got his, I think Wednesday morning. He texted me at like 5 in the morning. I got my shot, and all my friends are getting theirs this weekend. So I'm just a huge supporter of it. I'm ready to get back to the workforce. And I know that I probably wouldn't feel comfortable doing that without having a vaccine on board.
So today they just announced that there's a college basketball team in Houston that they're all diagnosed with COVID.
Hmm.
And they just did an emergency shutdown in the UK because it's getting worse over there. Why do you think that a portion of our population is not taking this social distancing seriously?
Well, I think America, so I think that what our country supposedly founded on, right? That idea of like freedom and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. I feel like the mouthing of those ideologies has just become that, right? Kind of empty for like a long. There's a certain group of people that feels like they've forgotten that we have a social contract. I feel like they're focused only on the part of, what's in it for me. And I've often felt this about American society in general, that we very much are out for ourselves. We kind of keep to our own little family, like that sense of community. Just I in my life, I would have thought that something like what's happening now with the pandemic again would have maybe erased some of that, right? Would have made us believe more than ever that it was important for us to be in part of a community. But somehow I think the distrust of the system, and even now, right? Like who's getting the vaccines first, right? I know it is the frontline healthcare workers, but it's also probably people with money, right? The haves, or the people in the government, or the people, and so again, here we are, we're the worker bees and we're just hanging out in the trenches. I think people don't trust, they don't trust those in charge, right? And so I feel like the pandemic, because of the length of time that we've all been sequestered like this, has made us weary of, what's the point? Kind of, it's not working. Nothing's working, right? I think people feel like a sense of futility. Whereas with me, when I see people start to get vaccinated, I can see this tiny little glimmer, right? Like this tiny little glimmer of, okay, I've done it for this long. I've been inside. My kids are out of school. I can hold on for a few more months. But I think a lot of people are A, over it, and B, not being affected by it in the same way, right? Like I have family members that are traveling all over the place, going to parties, going to bars, and number one, they have the money to be able to do that, which is a luxury, right? It's not what a lot of people are doing right now because A, the pandemic, but B, they just simply can't afford it, right? So I don't know. How I often ask myself, and how bad would it have to get before it mattered to some people? I truthfully don't know. I don't know. So I don't know if if your question really has like a definite answer. I know that as a parent, I'm always searching for those answers because I'm trying to teach my kids, right? Like how to make sense of this. And it doesn't make any sense to me. Try to explain it to a 9-year-old, right? Like it's a lot.
Yeah. What do you think the alternative is for people who are refusing to take the vaccine?
I think that there is always going to be an element of people that are going to refuse to take the vaccine. So in my mind, I think at least if we can get, what is it? It's 70%, I think. If 70% got it, that might, or 80%, I can't remember, got it, then we would be able to function maybe a little more normally. I don't know if there's an alternative. I mean, I'm not quite sure I understand. Do you mean like just they have to keep wearing masks, or they have to?
Yeah,
What?
that's something that's been on my mind a lot lately because they do that in Asian countries. They wear masks outside. Is that going to be our new normal in America as well?
I think for a while it might be, at least for the faction of society that has, taken that on. And I think that we will probably continue to do that. I know that it works, right? I told you I lived in Japan. I lived in Japan, and everyone wears them. I've got friends that live in Thailand, and they're just like, we just wear masks. Like we wear masks. And so I think that eventually we will get in the habit of doing that. I can see it maybe becoming a thing like the winter time. I don't know though. I'm looking forward to at this point to see what the world looks like coming out of this, right? Like I still always land on hope. I always land on out of this great mess, something really amazing could happen, right? Because I've seen it happen in my own life, like on several occasions. And so, um, I really do, if we can just get there, if we can just get to whenever that time is, I really do feel like we can see some transformation. I hope.
I think I agree with you. I 1,000% agree with you.
Because, right, like for the first time, I feel like a lot more people are engaged in these like very real conversations, right? I mean, I really do get that sense. And I think for someone that, like myself, who has been just watching everything from inside, literally for like all these months, it's been social media and the media, and then just my neighborhood, my immediate community, and just kind of watching it and just really getting that sense, feeling that sense. It's been a long journey, but really feeling like um, I can talk about things with my neighbors that I couldn't before, like taboo topics that or maybe topics that people just never discussed. And maybe too, that's part of my own cancer diagnosis. There's this thing where you get zero F's left to give, like once you get a cancer diagnosis, because like it doesn't matter, right? None of it matters. It's all baloney. It's all, so you just have this renewed sense of like clarity. And so maybe I'm bringing some of that to it as well, where my interaction with the world is going to be so different on the other side of this, that I feel inspired, I think.
So let's scenario, right? A
Yeah,
fire starting in
yeah.
your house right now. What's the first thing
Hmm.
that you're going to grab
Oh my God. Besides my kids, or are
besides
you
your
talking
kids?
about a physical thing?
Physical thing, yeah.
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I think I would grab, it sounds so stupid, but I'd like grab my phone and my tablet. It's got all my it's got all my stuff in it, It's got so many of my photos, and yeah,
Okay, cool,
all the
cool.
other stuff is replaceable, right? I
Yes,
really do feel that way.
yes.
Um, yeah, all the other stuff is replaceable. Not to diminish anyone's, you know, loss when their house burns down, but I definitely had that sense during the fires. My parents live in fire country. And if they could get out of their house and evacuated, I would be fine. And I would be like, okay, the rest of it is, it would be sad if it was gone, but
Science is not a liberal conspiracy.
correct. My favorite t-shirt.
Yes. Where did you get that from?
I bought it online right after the 2016 election. I bought t-shirts,
Really?
statement t-shirts from all kinds of different organizations that were fundraising for stuff. So I have quite a collection actually.
So I've noticed that throughout history, we've stopped listening to the scientists, we've stopped listening to the philosophers, and we're listening more to opinions. We're listening more to people who just who catch our attention because they're very charismatic. Why do you think that
Hmm.
is?
I'm not sure. I was just reading an interesting article about that, about the death of expertise, and
Mm.
how detrimental that is to a society, as a functioning society. Because if there's nobody whose opinion is more important than anyone else's in terms of a certain situation, then who's in charge, you know, like who makes the calls? And I think that that's what we've been watching, you know, the last 4 years, is that it's unclear who's making the calls. It's certainly not experts all the time, right? And so that erosion at that level, I think, really set a tone. You know, my husband and I, we live in rural Oregon, so we're like, it's the, we get a certain tone of voice, you know, you think you're better than me, like, and it's kind of that attitude, like, do you think? And it's like, well, and I think that there's a way for the answer to that question to be yes in some ways, right? Like, I want my anesthesiologist to be smarter than I am. I want my
Yes.
surgeon to know what I want him to be an expert. So yes, he is smarter than I am. Thank God, right? Like, thank God he's smarter than I am. And so I feel, I don't know if it's a pride or an ego or just a fear thing that doesn't allow people to accept that. I'm not, Americans seem to want, and I, not everyone, but want that fast. We want the pretty, we want the, you know, the new and fancy, I guess. Experts are boring, but it's so interesting, right? It's so interesting because I too, I don't know how we got here, because I grew up in a time when it was that. It was like the jocks versus the nerds. That was like the big thing, right? But at the end of that, we all decided that it was the nerds that kind of were the better people, right?
Yeah,
And
no,
now, like,
honestly, yeah.
and here we are again. Like, how did it cycle back to like the bullies getting to push us all around, you know? Like, I don't know how that happened, you know, but um you know, I talk about my kids a lot because that's my role right now. My main role is to try to rear humans, you know, to try to make them into people. And so having this backdrop, this insanity, and just trying to find that center where, okay, maybe I can pass on to them how important it is for us to have experts and scientists, and then they can become advocates, you know, for the next generation. And then I just try to speak up for it too, you know, in my personal life and on social media. And
So before your husband, you were in an abusive relationship.
it's true.
How long were you guys together, and how, I'm not going to ask why you got out because that's a stupid question. How,
Right.
how, how did you get out?
Well, as a lot of women that have been in that situation would know, that that's the hardest time, right? Like, getting out. And that was actually when it came to a head. We were actually broken up at the time that the big event, you know, the most brutal one happened, and he ended up in jail at that time. So I moved to Japan and he went to jail, right? Like, that was how kind of I dealt with it. But I don't think, looking back at it, it could have ended any other way. Like, I was very acutely aware of that at that time, in all of that heaviness and sorrow and brokenness. It happened exactly as it had to, and I was just very grateful that I got out, you know, when I did.
How was that
And
transition? Sorry, I apologize. Keep going.
that's okay. That's
How was
okay. Go
that
ahead.
transition from leaving an abusive relationship to finding love? Was it very hard for you to trust him?
Oh God, yes. So Matt and I met just a few years after all of that happened, and I wasn't ready. We had a fast, furious little, you know, love affair, fell madly in love, and then I ran, because that's what I do. So I ran, and that was 18 years ago. He stayed in my life. We stayed connected, and we kept kind of seeing each other occasionally. And yeah, about 10 years ago almost is when, 12 years ago maybe, he came back around. Um, I had to, when he came back around, that was one of the things I had to go to therapy, right? I had to work all of it out before I knew that I could commit myself to him for my life, you know? So I did that. I did a lot of hard work, a lot of heavy lifting. But, you know, we're still reaping the benefits of that, you know? I think everyone should go to therapy
Yeah.
at some point, right? Learn how to talk about it. So it takes the power out.
That's beautiful. Okay. So how do you feel when people say to you, you're so brave as an RN?
Um, I it, it's not brave. Like number one, an RN, you know, a year ago versus what's now is very different, right? And so I think that a lot of RNs that are advocating and speaking out right now are saying, you know, um, this is actually not what we signed up for. Not that they're not willing to do it, but you know, the lacking PPE, the chaos, you know, all of that stuff that wasn't supportive, was kind of at the same time that people, you know, they were doing the flyovers at the hospitals and putting signs outside and all of this. And so it wasn't, I don't know. I don't think it's bravery necessarily. I think that there's certain people that can do the profession, and then there's certain people that can't, you know? Yeah.
Okay. What's your most unusual talent?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I can dislocate my shoulders.
No, you can't.
Like, yes, I can. And it was a party trick in high school and college. My best friend used to be like, someday we're going to see Kate and she's going to have a walker and she's going to be like flipping her shoulders out of joint to like make everybody laugh. Yes, I can dislocate my shoulders. I probably won't do it for you now unless, I mean, no, I won't do it.
Oh, yeah. Did you ever think about joining the circus?
I did. I was a dancer when I was younger.
That makes sense why you can dislocate your shoulders now, because you're a
Yeah,
dancer.
and that's how I learned that I could do that. And I've met one person that could do it as well. We were like soul sisters immediately, and I've seen like contortionists doing it. That is something though. And there was a time in my life when if I could go back and someone were to ask me to like get into doing something like that, like some kind of performance contortion, that I would have probably taken it. I can't anymore. My bones are getting old, but
Oh, yeah. Okay. Where can we like you, stalk you, follow you, all that fun stuff?
So I'm so embarrassed. I'm still on Facebook because I have a lot of family, older people that live all over the country. And there I'm just my name, Kate Baum. Keitosan is on Instagram, and I am at Little Kate Baum on Twitter.
And then last question, and then I'll let you go.
Yeah.
When is your book coming out?
Oh my gosh. I was supposed to work on that during this year, and it's like, you know, the keyboard is there and the kids are too. So maybe once they start a hybrid version of going back to school a little bit, I can work on my book.
So the schools are shut down in Oregon, period.
Yeah, we have very few in-person options. So it's been all remote. Yeah.
That's very interesting how like county to county, like there's so much inconsistencies.
I know. I've got nephews in Oklahoma that have been going to school, you know, the whole time, and it's interesting.
Wow. Sorry. Okay. Well, Keito-san, I feel like I should bow.
I'm so glad to meet you, and thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for your wisdom, and thank you so much for your honesty.
Yeah,
and I
thank you for
appreciate
having
you.
me. Yeah, thanks.
I'll be messaging you. Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye, Ashley.